Chapter 4. Empiricistic consequences of psychologism. 21. Characterizing two empiricistic consequences of the psychologistic standpoint, and their refutation. Let us place ourselves for the moment on the ground of the psychologistic logic, and let us assume therefore that the essential theoretical foundations of the prescriptions of logic lie in psychology. However the latter discipline may be defined as the science of psychic phenomena, of the facts of consciousness, of the facts of internal experience, of experiences in their dependence on the experiencing individual, or whatever, it is universally agreed that psychology is a factual and therefore an empirical science. We shall also not be controverted if we add that psychology has so far lacked genuine and therefore exact laws, and that the propositions in it which are dignified with the name of laws, are merely vague, even if valuable, generalizations from experience. They are statements about approximate regularities of coexistence and succession, which make no claim to determine, with infallible, unambiguous definiteness, what will go together or will follow in exactly described relationships. One may look to the laws of the association of ideas, to which association psychology wished to accord the position and importance of basic psychological laws. As soon as one takes the trouble adequately to formulate their empirically justified sense, they at once lose the pretended character of laws. This being granted, most serious consequences arise for the psychologistic logicians. The first is that only vague rules could be based on vague theoretical foundations. If psychological laws lack exactness, the same must be true of the prescriptions of logic. It cannot be doubted that many of these prescriptions are infected with empirical vaguenesses. But precisely the laws which are pointedly called logical, which as laws of proof make up the real core of all logic, the logical principles, the laws of syllogism, the laws of many other kinds of inference, as, for example, equational inferences, the Bernoullian argument from n to n+1, the principles of probability inferences, etc., are of absolute exactness. Every interpretation that would base them on empirical indefinitenesses, make them depend for their validity on vague circumstances, would fundamentally alter their true sense. Plainly they are genuine laws, and not merely empirical, i.e. approximate, laws. If, as Lotz thought, pure mathematics is merely an independently developed branch of logic, the above-mentioned sphere of exact logical laws will also cover the inexhaustible wealth of the laws of pure mathematics. In all further objections we must keep our eye on the sphere of pure mathematics together with our sphere of logic. In the second place, were one to seek to counter our first objection by denying the thoroughgoing inexactness of psychological laws, and try to found norms of the above-mentioned type on supposedly exact natural laws, little would have been gained. No natural laws can be known a priori, nor established by sheer insight. The only way in which a natural law can be established and justified, is by induction from the singular facts of experience. Induction does not establish the holding of the law, only the greater or lesser probability of its holding. The probability, and not the law, is justified by insight. Logical laws must, accordingly, without exception, rank as mere probabilities. Nothing, however, seems plainer than that the laws of pure logic all have a priori validity. They are established and justified, not by induction, but by apodeictic inner evidence. Insight justifies no mere probabilities of their holding, but their holding or truth itself. The law of contradiction does not tell us that one must surmise that one of two contradictory judgments is true, one false. The mood Barbara does not tell us that when two propositions of the form all A's are BS and all BS are CS are true, it is to be surmised that a corresponding proposition of the form all A's are CS is true. And so generally, and in the field of mathematics as well. Otherwise we should have to treat it as an open possibility that such a surmise would fail to be confirmed by an extension of our ever-limited horizon of experience. Perhaps our logical laws are mere approximations to genuinely valid laws of thought that are beyond our reach. Such possibilities are seriously and rightly weighed in the case of natural laws. Though the law of gravitation is recommended by the most comprehensive inductions and verifications, no investigator of nature would now look on it as an absolutely valid law. New gravitational formulae are occasionally tried out. It was shown, for example, that Weber's basic law for electrical phenomena could quite well function as the basic law of gravity. The differentiating factor in both formulae conditions differences in calculated values not exceeding the field of unavoidable observational error. Innumerable factors of this sort are, however, thinkable, hence we know a priori that endlessly many laws could and must do the same work as the Newtonian law of gravitation, recommended only by its peculiar simplicity. We know that, in view of uneliminable observational imprecision, it would be foolish to look for uniquely true law. Such is the situation in the exact factual sciences, but by no means in logic. The justified possibility of the former becomes the open absurdity of the latter. We have insight into, not merely the probability, but the truth of the logical laws. We see the truth of the principles of the syllogism, of Bernoullian induction, of arguments in probability, of general arithmetic, etc. We grasp their very truth, so that talk of zones of inexactness, of mere approximations, etc., loses all possible sense. But if what follows from a demand for a psychological validation of logic is absurd, this validation is itself absurd. Against the truth that is itself grasped with insight, the strongest psychologistic argument cannot avail. Probability cannot wrestle with truth, nor surmise with insight. If anyone likes to stay in a sphere of general discussions, he may allow the psychologistic arguments to deceive him. But a mere glance at any logical principle, at its real meaning and the full insight with which it is seen as true in itself, must abolish such deceit. How plausible the ready suggestions of psychologistic reflection sound. Logical laws are laws for validations, proofs. What are validations but peculiar human trains of thought, in which, in normal circumstances, the finally emergent judgments seem endowed with a necessarily consequential character. This character is itself a mental one, a peculiar mode of mindedness and no more. And, obviously, none of these mental phenomena is isolated, but is a single thread in the tangled web of mental phenomena, of mental disposition and organic process, called human life. How could anything beyond empirical generalities result in such circumstances? Where has psychology yielded more? We reply, psychology certainly does not yield more, and cannot for this reason yield the apodeictically evident, and so meet empirical and absolutely exact laws which form the core of all logic. 22. The laws of thought as supposed laws of nature which operate in isolation as causes of rational thought. Here is also the place to take up an attitude towards a widely held conception of logical law, which characterizes correct thought by its conformity with certain laws of thought, however we may formulate them, but is disposed at the same time to interpret such conformity in the following psychologistic manner. The laws of thought count as natural laws characterizing the peculiarity of our mind qua thinking, and the essence of the conformity, as definitory of correct thinking, lies in the pure operation of these laws, their non-disturbance by alien mental influences, such as custom, inclination, tradition. Compare the citations above in 19 from Lup's article on the task of epistemology. We need only instance one of the grave consequences of this doctrine. Laws of thought, as causal laws governing acts of knowledge in their mental interweaving, could only be stated in the form of probabilities. On this basis, no assertion could be certainly judged correct, since probabilities, taken as the standard of all certainty, must impress a merely probabilistic stamp on all knowledge. We should stand confronted by the most extreme probabilism. Even the assertion that all knowledge was merely probable would itself only hold probably. This would hold of this latter assertion, and so on in infinitum. Since each successive step reduces the probability level of the previous one a bit, we should become gravely concerned about the worth of all knowledge. One may hope, however, that, with some luck, the probability levels of these infinite series may always have the character of a Cantorian fundamental series, of such a sort that the final limiting value or the probability of the knowledge to be judged is a real number, 0. Skeptical awkwardnesses would of course vanish if one looked on the laws of thought as matters of direct insight. But how should one have insight into causal laws? Even if this difficulty were removed, we could still ask, where on earth is the proof that the pure operation of these laws, or any other laws, would yield correct laws of thinking? Where are the descriptive and genetic analyses which entitle us to explain the phenomena of thought by two sorts of natural law, one exclusively determining such causal sequences as allow logical thought to emerge, whereas others help to determine logical thought? Does the assessment of thoughts by logical laws amount to a proof of their causal origin in these same laws as laws of nature? It seems that certain ready confusions have here opened the way to psychologistic errors. Logical laws have first been confused with the judgments, in the sense of acts of judgment, in which we may know them. The laws, as contents of judgment, have been confused with the judgments themselves. The latter are real events, having causes and effects. Judgments whose contents are laws are, in particular, frequently operative as doubt motives, directing the course of our thought experience, as those contents, the laws of thinking, prescribe. In such cases the real order and connection of our thought experience is conformed to that which we think generally in our governing knowledge of the law. It is a concrete individual instance of that general law. If, however, the law is confused with the judgment or knowledge of the law, the ideal with the real, the law appears as a governing power in our train of thought. With understandable ease a second confusion is added to the first. We confuse a law as a term in causation with a law as a rule of causation. In other fields, too, we familiarly employ mythic talk of natural laws as presiding powers in natural events, as if the rules of causal connection could themselves once more significantly function as causes, i.e. as terms in just such connections. The serious confusion of things so essentially dissimilar has plainly been favored in the case before us by the previous confusion of a law with the knowledge of a law. Logical laws already appeared as motive powers in thinking. They presided causally, it was imagined, over the course of our thoughts. They were accordingly causal laws of thinking. They expressed how we must think in consequence of the nature of our mind. They characterized the human mind as a thinking mind in the pointed sense. If at times we think otherwise than these laws require, we are not, properly speaking, thinking at all. We are not judging as the natural laws of thinking, or the nature of our mind qua thinking, requires, but as other laws determine, once more causally. We are following the disturbing leads of custom, passion, etc. Other motives of course may have suggested the same conception. The empirical fact that persons performing normally in a given sphere, for example scientists in their fields, usually judge in a logically correct manner, seems to demand, as a natural explanation, that the logical laws by means of which the correctness of thinking is assessed, also determine the course of thinking, in the manner of causal laws, while isolated deviations from the norm may readily be put to the account of the troubling influences stemming from other psychological sources. Against this the following argument should suffice. Let us imagine an ideal person, in whom all thinking proceeds as logical laws require. Naturally the fact that this occurs must have its explanatory ground in certain psychological laws, which govern the course of the mental experiences of this being, starting from certain initial collocations. I now ask, would the natural laws and the logical laws in this assumed situation be one and the same? Obviously the answer is no. Causal laws, according to which thought must proceed in a manner which the ideal norms of logic might justify, are by no means identical with those norms. If a being were so constituted as never to be able to frame contradictory judgments in a unified train of thought, as never to be able to perform inferences which defy the syllogistic moods, this would not mean that the law of contradiction, the modus barbara etc., were laws of nature explanatory of this being's constitution. The example of a computer makes the difference quite clear. The arrangement and connection of the figures which spring forth is regulated by natural laws which accord with the demands of the arithmetical propositions which fix their meanings. No one, however, who wants to give a physical explanation of the machine's procedures, will appeal to arithmetical instead of mechanical laws. The machine is no thought machine, it understands neither itself nor the meaning of its performances. But our own thought machine might very well function similarly, except that the real course of one kind of thought would always have to be recognized as correct by the insight brought forward in another. This latter thinking could be the product of the same or other thought machines, but ideal evaluation and causal explanation would nonetheless remain disparate. The initial collocations should also not be forgotten, indispensable in causal explanation, they are senseless for ideal evaluation. The psychologistic logicians ignore the fundamental, essential, never-to-bridge gulf between ideal and real laws, between normative and causal regulation, between logical and real necessity, between logical and real grounds. No conceivable gradation could mediate between the ideal and the real. It is characteristic of the low state of logical insights in our time, that a thinker of Sigwart stature should dare, in connection with the fiction of an intellectually ideal being like that discussed above, to maintain that, for such a being, logical necessity would also be a real necessity that engenders real thinking, or that he should make use of the concept without compulsion to elucidate the notion of logical ground. Sigwart, Logic, 1, p. 259f. The same holds of Wundt when he sees in the law of sufficient reason the basic law of the dependence of our thought acts on one another. Wundt, Logic, I, p. 573. That one is really concerned in these connections with basic errors in logic will, one hopes, become a certainty, even to the prejudiced, in the course of further investigations. 23. A third consequence of psychologism, and its refutation. A third consequence, see 21 above, for the psychologistic logician is that, if the laws of logic have their epistemological source in psychological matter of fact, if, for example, as our opponents generally say, they are normative transformations of such facts, they must themselves be psychological in content, both by being laws for mental states, and also by presupposing or implying the existence of such states. This is palpably false. No logical law implies a matter of fact, not even the existence of presentations or judgments or other phenomena of knowledge. No logical law, properly understood, is a law for the facticities of mental life, and so not a law for presentations, as experiences, nor for judgments, experiences of judging, nor for our other mental experiences. Most psychologistic thinkers are too deeply enthralled by their general prejudice even to try to verify it in the case of the definitely acknowledged logical laws. If such laws must be psychological, why try to show in detail that they really are so? No one sees that a consistent psychologism would force one to interpret logical laws in a manner quite alien to their true sense. One fails to see that these laws, naturally understood, presuppose nothing mental, no facts of psychic life, whether in their establishment or their content. They do so no more than the laws of pure mathematics do so. If psychologism were on the right track, one should, in treating of syllogisms, expect only rules of the following type. It is an empirical fact that, in circumstances X, conclusions of the form C, stamped with a podeictically necessary consequence, attend upon premises of the form P. To syllogize correctly, i.e. to achieve judgments of this distinctive stamp through syllogizing, one must proceed in this manner. One must see that the circumstances really are X, and the premises P. Mental matters of fact would then be the matters regulated. The existence of such matters would be presupposed in the grounding of such laws, and would be part of their content. But no single syllogistic rule is of such a type. What, for example, does the mood Barbara tell us? Only this, that, if in the case of any class terms O, B, call A's are BS and all B's CS, then all A's will be CS. The modus ponens, likewise, written out in full, reads, it is a valid law for any propositions P, Q, that if P is the case, and it also is the case that if P is the case Q is so, then Q also is the case. These and all similar laws are as little psychological as they are empirical. They were of course set up by traditional logic to serve as norms for our judging activities. But do they implicitly say anything about a single actual judgment, or about any other mental phenomenon? If anyone thinks they do, let him prove it. Whatever a proposition implicitly asserts can be inferred from it in a valid syllogism. But what forms of syllogism permit us to deduce facts from a pure law? It is irrelevant to object that talk of logical laws never could have arisen had we not actually experienced presentations and judgments, and abstracted the relevant, basic logical concepts from them, or that, wherever we understand and assert such laws, the existence of presentations and judgments is implied, and can therefore be inferred. We need hardly observe that this does not follow from our law, but from the fact that we understand and assert such a law, and that a like consequence could be inferred from every assertion. One ought not, further, to confuse the psychological presuppositions or components of the assertion of a law with the logical moments of its content. Empirical laws have, eo ipso, a factual content. Not being true laws, they merely say, roughly speaking, that certain coexistences or successions obtain generally in certain circumstances, or may be expected, with varying probability, in varying circumstances. But even the strict laws of the natural sciences are not without factual content. They do not merely concern facts, but also imply their existence. We must, however, be more precise. Exact laws, as normally formulated, are pure laws. They exclude all factual content. But, if we consider the proofs to which they owe their scientific justification, it is at once clear that we cannot justify them as pure laws, in their normal formulation. The law of gravitation, as formulated in astronomy, has never really been proved. What has been proved is a proposition of the form, our knowledge up to date serves to found a probability of the highest theoretical dignity to the effect that, insofar as experience yields to the instruments on hand, either Newton's law, or one of the endlessly many conceivable mathematical laws whose differences from Newton's law lie within the limits of unavoidable experimental error is true. This truth carries its big load of factual content, and is not at all a law in the strict sense of the word. It also plainly includes several vaguely delimited concepts. All laws of fact in the exact sciences are accordingly genuine laws, but, epistemologically considered, no more than idealizing fictions with a fundamentum. They fulfill the task of rendering those theoretical sciences possible, which bring the ideal of science as near as may be to actuality, and so realize, to the extent that this can be within the unsurmountable limits of human knowledge, the ideal of explanatory theory, of law-governed unity, the highest theoretical aim of all scientific research into facts. Instead of the absolute knowledge that is denied us, we use our insight on individual and general facts of experience, and from these first work out those apodeictic probabilities, so to speak, in which all attainable knowledge of the real is comprehended. We then reduce these probabilities to certain exact thoughts having the genuine form of laws, and so succeed in building up formally perfect systems of explanatory theory. Such systems as theoretical mechanics, theoretical acoustics, theoretical optics, theoretical astronomy etc. really only hold as ideal possibilities with a fundamentum. They do not exclude countless other possibilities, but even include these within limits. This, however, concerns us no further, nor are we concerned to discuss the practical functions in knowledge of these ideal theories, their feats of successfully predicting future facts or reconstructing past ones, and their technical feats of enabling us to master nature practically. We return to the case we were considering. If, as we have shown, pure law remains a mere ideal in the realm of factual knowledge, it is realized in the realm of purely conceptual knowledge. In this sphere our purely logical laws belong, as well as the laws of Mathesispora. Their origin, or, rather, their justifying proof, is not an inductive one, and so they are free from that existential content which attaches to all probabilities as such, even to such as are the highest and most valuable. What they say has entire validity, they themselves in their absolute exactness are evident and proven, and not, in their stead, certain other assertions of probability of obviously vague constitution. The law we have is not one of countless theoretical possibilities within a certain factually delimited sphere. It is the single, sole truth which excludes all other possibilities and which, being established by insight, is kept pure from fact in its content and mode of proof. The above considerations show how intimately the two halves of the psychologistic case hang together, that logical laws do not merely entail existential assertions of mental facts, but are also laws for such facts. We have just refuted the first half of their case. But the following argument suggests that our refutation also covers the second half. For just as each law established empirically and inductively from singular facts is a law for such facts, so, conversely, each law for facts is a law established empirically and inductively, and from such a law, as has been shown, assertions with existential content are inseparable. We ought of course to exclude from factual laws such general assertions as merely apply pure conceptual propositions, which state universally valid relations on a basis of pure concepts, to matters of fact. If 3, 2, then the 3 books on this table also exceed the 2 books in this cupboard, and so for any things whatever. But our pure proposition of number does not refer to things, but to numbers in their pure generality. It is the number 3 that is greater than the number 2, and it applies not merely to individual, but to general objects, for example to species of color or sound, to types of geometrical figure and to such like timeless generalities. If all this is admitted, it is of course impossible to regard logical laws, considered in their purity, as the laws either of mental activities or of mental products. 24 Continuation. Many would perhaps try to evade our conclusion by objecting, not every law for facts has an empirico-inductive origin. We should rather draw a distinction. All knowledge of law rests on experience, but not all such knowledge arises out of experience inductively, by the well-known logical process which goes from singular facts, or empirical generalities of lower level, to general laws. The laws of logic are, in particular, empirical, but not inductive laws. The basic notions of logic are abstracted from psychological experience together with the purely conceptual relations given with them. What we find true in the individual case, we recognize at a glance to be true universally, since based upon abstracted contents. Experience accordingly yields an immediate awareness of the law-governed character of our mind. And since we have no need of induction, our conclusion is likewise free from inductive imperfection. It has no mere character of probability, but one of apodeictic certainty. It is not vague, but precise in sense. It in no way includes assertions having existential content. What is here objected will not, however, do. Undoubtedly our knowledge of logical laws, considered as an act of mind, presupposes an experience of individuals, has its basis in concrete intuition. But one should not confuse the psychological presuppositions and bases of the knowledge of a law with the logical presuppositions, the grounds and premises, of that law. We should also, therefore, not confuse psychological dependence, for example dependence of origin, with logical demonstration and justification. The latter conforms to an insight into the objective relation of ground and consequence, whereas the former relates to mental links of coexistence and succession. No one can seriously hold that the concrete singular cases before us, on which our insight into law is grounded, really function as logical grounds or premises, as if the mere existence of such singulars entailed the universality of law. Our intuitive grasp of the law may require two psychological steps, one glance at the singulars of intuition, and a related insight into law. Logically, however, only one step is required. The content of our insight is not inferred from singulars. All knowledge begins with experience, but it does not therefore arise from experience. What we assert is that each law for facts arises from experience, which means that it can only be inductively based on individual experiences. If there are laws known by insight, these cannot, immediately, be laws for facts. Where in the past immediate self-evidence has been claimed for factual laws, it is clear that men have been confusing genuine factual laws, i.e. laws of coexistence and succession, with ideal laws to which a reference to definite times is alien, or that they have been confusing the lively persuasive force of familiar empirical generalities, with the insight only found in the realm of pure concepts. Should such an argument not seem decisive, it can nonetheless serve to strengthen other arguments. Another such argument will be here added. Hardly anyone would deny that all laws of pure logic are of one and the same character. If we can show, in the case of some of them, that they cannot possibly be regarded as laws for facts, the same must hold for all of them. Among logical laws there are, however, some which concern truths, which have truths as their regular objects. It is the case, for example, that for every truth A, its contradictory opposite is no truth. It is the case, for each pair of truths A, B, that their conjunctions and disjunctions too are truths, and that if three truths A, B, C are so related that A is a ground for B, B for C, that A is also a ground for C. It is, however, absurd to treat laws which hold for truths as such, as laws for facts. No truth is a fact, i.e. something determined as to time. A truth can indeed have as its meaning that something is, that a state exists, that a change is going on, etc. The truth itself is, however, raised above time, i.e. it makes no sense to attribute temporal being to it, nor to say that it arises or perishes. This absurdity is clearest in the case of the laws of truth themselves. If they were real laws, they would be rules for the coexistence and succession of facts, i.e. of such facts as are truths, and to these facts, which they govern, they themselves as truths would belong. A law would therefore ascribe a coming and going to certain facts called truths, among which, as one among others, the law would itself be found. The law would arise and perish in conformity with the law, a patent absurdity. The case is similar if we treat the law of truth as a law of coexistence, as temporally singular and yet fixing a general rule for each and every existence in time. Such absurdities 3 are unavoidable if the fundamental distinction between ideal and real objects, and the corresponding distinction between ideal and real laws, is disregarded or misunderstood. We shall see repeatedly how this distinction settles the disputes which divide psychologistic logic from pure logic.